Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to InsurTech Amplified. We are joined today by Ichun Lai, a principal at Propel Global Advisory, and Theresa Blissing, the best-selling author of The Future of Insurance, Asia Rising, and, coincidentally, the founder of InsurTech Amplified. Our audience knows Theresa really well. She's been on the show a bunch of times. But Ichun, let's get a bit of your background for some context, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Michael and Theresa. About me, I founded Propel Global recently, actually, with a single goal in mind. That is to help accelerate the responsible and purposeful adoption of artificial intelligence in financial services, particularly in insurance, through strong execution and strategic partnerships. And I actually became curious about AI 4 years ago, curious enough to take a couple courses at MIT to really understand the technology, how it works, what it can or cannot do as of yet, and just think through the business implications. So I actually realized, and I truly believe, that AI has the potential to tackle the protection gaps and the legacy issues in insurance in ways that traditional computing simply can't, right? I really think that the insurance industry needs to use AI to free up the resources, capital resources, financial resources, so that we can tackle new risks, cover new risks, and also better meet customer expectations. And I really, truly believe that. So that's why I founded Propel Global and named it Propel Global, because I like to do what I can to move the industry forward. So my background, why am I qualified to do this? I spent decades leading change projects at global companies, including Cigna, Tokyo Marine, and a few gigs at Goldman Sachs, and most recently SMBC. And so through that experience, I've learned what it takes to turn strategies into results, right? And so it takes a lot of explaining, a lot of persuading, and just figure out what motivates everybody. And, get people to agree on this is the end goal and how we get to the end goal. So hopefully that's helpful.
That's great. I didn't realize you also worked at Goldman Sachs. I left my soul at Goldman Sachs, so fair enough.
I was just about to say, you two should have met much earlier when Ichun was also working in Tokyo, and Michael, you spent also. I think you probably have been there at the same time, and here we
probably.
are. Probably a decade later, meeting on InsurTech Amplified.
I love it. This is the reason why you created InsurTech Amplified. We definitely should. Yeah. And to be fair, I'm already thinking we should have you on again just to talk about this idea of Propel, because I think there's a lot of stuff that we're not going to be able to get to today that sounds actually really interesting to me. Theresa, let's start with you. You and Ichun recently published a white paper on bias in AI-driven decision-making, right? And this is really, really important. Why did the two of you decide to work on this?
Well, unfortunately, not everyone is, like Ichun and, many in the industry, a firm believer of lifelong learning, taking additional courses. And I think we all agree that AI is now part of everyday life and, part of every organization. I mean, you just need to go to any insurance conference and, the main topic is going to be AI in some shape or form. And while, there is a lot of potential in AI to, close, protection gaps, to make it more efficient, to allow people to really focus on, the interesting tasks and what they are good at. But at the same time, we just have to acknowledge that there are also some risks, and, bias is just one of them. So that's why Ichun and I teamed up, and we actually interviewed a whole bunch of people, including Stephen Barnham, who you know also quite well, John Standish, who was also on the show before. And we're really grateful for the insights those experts have shared with us. And that resulted in the white paper we have published a couple of weeks ago.
Interesting. Okay, let's dig into this. I want to understand how the AI bias in insurance and financial services. I really want to get to the bottom of this. Ichun, how do AI-driven decision-making processes in financial services introduce and potentially amplify bias?
Sure. So first, we just need to remember AI comes in different forms, right?
Yeah.
And the kind that introduces bias is typically the one that uses machine learning models to make predictions based on how they are trained, based on the data they are trained. And so those models actually detect patterns from the data they are trained on. And if the data contains biases, and it can be due to historical reasons, can be due to data simply incomplete, or some assumptions the human beings made, etc., AI will pick up. AI will pick up those patterns, and if those patterns have bias, then those bias will be amplified in the output of the model. So for example, if let's take maybe a loan approval AI as an example, right? If that model is trained on historical data that actually says that certain zip codes have higher loan rejection rate, then the AI model will assume, okay, people from those zip codes probably are riskier, and then go ahead and deny the application. So it's just an example of how the training data influences the outcome.
So this is redlining you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah. But data is not only, bias doesn't come from data alone. It also comes from how it's designed to make a decision, including the factors that the models consider, how it becomes technical, but how the model actually weighs different inputs, etc. And on top of that, even how the problem is framed, right? All these can impact how AI make decisions. And give you another example. Go back to the loan approval example. If credit history is prioritized and over other alternative factors such as ability to pay rent or utility bills, then those people that do not have the traditional credit history would be denied, even though they are financially responsible.
Got it. Look, I want to get to how we mitigate this in a little bit, but first I want to ask Theresa, what are the key differences between human-led AI decisions, hybrid, which I think is where a lot of these decisions are going to get made, and then just fully autonomous, probably like agentic AI decision-making in the insurance sector?
Yeah, no, good point. And it's really, AI decision-making is a spectrum, right? So we have what you mentioned, human-led with AI assistance. So this is basically just an AI helping a human in their decision-making, right? By, for example, flagging potential fraud. Then you have hybrid models where AI, automates routine tasks, and humans only handle exceptions, and then all the way to fully autonomous systems where the AI makes a decision. without human intervention, without human oversight, right? So it's really a spectrum. And I think a lot of people believe that, the closer you get to the fully autonomous decisions, that there is a higher risk for bias. But that is actually not true. You have, an equal amount of risk, or the potential for risk in all these, different levels of involvement of AI, right? So, for example, a fully autonomous example would be a parametric insurance claim, right? So we talk about parametric quite a lot on Amplified. When, for example, you are missing your flight and you get automatically, paid out your claim. There's very little risk for bias in this specific example. But then the other example I gave, with human-led decision-making about fraud detection, maybe the human or, the person looking at that fraud case wouldn't flag it as fraud, but then AI comes in and flags it as fraud. The person, I guess, naturally thinks like, okay, there must be something, and, doesn't trust maybe his or her own experience and goes with the recommendation or, the potential fraud that the AI has flagged. So it's just really important to keep in mind, however strong you involve AI, you always have to question that, the decision might not be correct. There are many cases where AI can be wrong, where AI can be biased. And, Ichun has explained some of the reasons why this is introduced. So it's really important along the spectrum of involving AI to realize there's always a risk of bias, no matter how great the influence of AI is and how much a human is in the loop.
Yeah, I completely agree. Ichun, let's address this though, right? Like, how can insurers and financial institutions have the right balance? Because the AI is supposed to be out there giving you efficiency. And the only thing I can think of when I think about it is, bias or not, it creates an incredible amount of scale, right? But where is human oversight necessary, particularly as Theresa was mentioning, in these like high stake decision makings like underwriting and claims is the one that really comes to my mind, right? Because that's where the rubber hits the road in insurance, is in claims. Yeah. How do you strike the right balance here?
Yeah. It really goes down to the consideration. It's actually a critical management decision in terms of AI adoption, right? Efficiency in terms of running the model and using AI's power in processing huge amount of transactions and consistently, if programmed right, much better than human beings, right? But at the same time, the risk. It's really a key decision. It really, even within claims or underwriting, I think really goes down to the nature of the product and to what extent the decision impacts individual consumers, the possibility of causing harm. So it's really just striking the balance between the two.
Can I just follow up on that a little bit? Do you think there's a mindset change inside, not just the insurers, but really inside of any company, but let's just stick to insurers and financial services companies, just a mindset change in just how powerful this technology is and how much more closely attention they need to pay to these things and these concerns that you're raising? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Coming from senior management and dribbling all the way down to like everybody who's on the front lines.
Yeah. And I want to believe that. And it really goes down to the organizations and the people who you speak to. I think we are still in the early stage, but I do sense more attention, more awareness, especially I think people in general understand AI has risks, but bias in particular depends on the individuals. And those I have been spoken to feel that they are still in too early of a stage of adopting AI to really seriously look into bias. And that's why when Theresa invited me to work with her on this topic, I was like so excited. It's like,
you must
it's
have been.
so critical. It's so critical. But people kind of know that, but do they really understand that? I don't know, but I want to believe that it's getting the attention. Particularly, I do believe that regulators are actually paying much closer attention. So companies and management better start to pay attention.
So, Ichun, you already addressed some of the common causes of bias in AI models used in insurance, but if you want to address a couple more, that's fine. But if you don't, how can companies proactively identify these? In other words, besides the mindset change that we just talked about, there's got to be, like, it's hard to walk around from desk to desk, right? If you're just talking to insurance agents and then claims processors and underwriters and say, like, you're biased, that's almost impossible to do. But once you invoke AI, then there are other, because it's at scale and it's sitting maybe above everybody, there have to be ways that they can identify them in maybe the outcomes and the outputs. How do they do that, and how do they address these biases?
That's a great question, Michael, because let's face it, most users, most applications do not have direct control of the training data. Right? A lot of applications are actually built upon pre-trained large models, language models such as ChatGPT, etc. Right, and all the open source models out there. I think the fundamental minimal thing that individuals and companies can do is to make sure people understand how bias occurs and the sources of bias, and continue to ask the question, how is the model trained? What's the data behind the model that I am using, or I will start to use?
So I guess
go ahead.
No, I think it's a really good answer, but I think the real question then is, how do you test that, right? So this is this idea of, like, what strategies or best practices can companies adopt to ensure that that the biases are minimized, right? Because in a way, it's almost like being an engineer. You're never going to eliminate the noise. You just want to minimize the noise so you can see the signals. And in a way, you're probably never going to eliminate completely bias, but you definitely want to minimize it. What can you do to do that? Like, how do you test it? A lot of companies that I talk to say they test it internally first before they roll it out to their clients. What are some of these best practices that we need to do?
Test for sure, and there are a lot of. It's becoming a little bit too technical for me to answer, but my understanding is that you will have outputs from the model. And then you also have resources to really know the population that this model intends to serve. And there are a lot of statistics out there, especially from the privacy protection from other industries, that can serve as a benchmark. And you just need to continue to apply statistics, and then also decide what the comfort level you will be, what's acceptable. And then continue to either retrain or make a decision not to go ahead. And so it's really constant using technical, statistical approaches, at the same time be mindful of what's out there and make decisions within the fairness standards internally and externally that you establish for the organization.
That's such a great answer. And Theresa, I want to get your opinion on this as well. But before I do that, I want to make a comment, and you don't have to react to it, but there's this constant flow of opinions about, like, oh, AI is going to destroy everybody's job and all these people but you've just mentioned something like all this testing that has to get done. Someone's going to have to do that. That's going to have to be like a new person's job. And I was thinking as you were saying that like, that just sounds like a pretty cool job for someone to do. Like all the statistical analysis, all of the like things that have to get covered to do the testing. There's like a whole new range of people can have that job. Sorry, Theresa, I wanted to get your opinion on this as well.
Yeah, no, just commenting on what you just mentioned, right? I also think there's a whole new set of roles that is needed, not only in insurance, financial services, but for any organization, right? And we talked a lot about, how AI is amplifying bias, etc. But at the same time, we also have the opportunity to identify bias, because bias in AI is not that, AI is bias itself. It just replicates the real world, and the world is biased. It's just, a fact. So I think it really gives opportunity for companies to get a better overview by, paying attention to this and having people who are overseeing the implementation of AI and the outputs, and then are maybe able to identify biases who have existed in any organization before, like, human biases by, all the people who are making decisions every day. But now, by, combining those and having those decisions made by one AI and not 100 employees, you are able to spot these biases and, act on them and hopefully eliminate them or minimize them at least, right? And that's also why we need transparency in these systems. We need to understand how are these decisions made, etc. And I know there's this argument that black box solutions where you don't know how an AI came up with a decision can be more advanced. But at the same time, I believe it is important to understand how decisions are made and to identify certain biases. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. And Michael, as you mentioned, a whole new set of skills and positions that, should be installed in every organization.
Yeah. And it gets back to the idea that I posited earlier where I said, like, it's really hard to go around to everybody's desk and say, hey, you're biased. Yeah. But if everybody's using the same model and you're at least trying to eliminate as much bias from the model as you possibly can, it's a lot easier to then mitigate it or at least control it or at least understand it if you build it in. Yeah. I mean, there are problems if it doesn't get built in, but fair enough. Ichun, talk to me about that. Go ahead.
Can I just add on to that? Because that actually then, that's why AI literacy and bias being part of the AI literacy is so critical, right? Because if people understand, you want people to understand the power, the potentials of AI, so that people get excited and you get them to buy in and wanting to be part of it, and that will address the anxiety people have about AI, right? But at the same time, as part of the AI literacy program, you educate people, and I want to believe that most people are decent if they know there's bias in there. As they get involved in the AI part of the AI process, they will be mindful. You just need to help them understand how bias comes from and what potentially can do. And on top of that, then you on a cultural level, on the company level, that's where the fairness standards and all the existing governance will just need to amplify fairness and transparency and explainability. And those are the three core principles you can rely on to really set the right tone, set the culture. And that culture will encourage employees, encourage everybody to talk about the bias that they identify and then do what they can to kind of mitigate that. And I want to go back to the new jobs, new skill set and roles that we talked about.
Go for it.
Actually, and that's the beauty of AI. So when AI is adopted and applied in the right way, it actually will eliminate a lot of the manual processes that people in finance or people, data scientists, data engineers are doing every day. You can literally free them up so that they can actually start to take on those new jobs that we started to see. They are already trained to do that. They just have not had time and energy to do that because they are so bogged down by manual work they have to do every day. So data scientists, data engineers, and data analysts are actually already the front line, having the skill sets to really contribute to bias mitigation.
Yeah, I want to make one more point about this idea of literacy. I don't remember the exact statistic, right? So I'm just going to kind of round around it. But a lot of people in the insurance industry are going to age out over the next like 10 or 15 years, which means that the workforce is going to get much younger just through attrition, right? Not because people are going to get laid off. And what that means is that a lot of the people that are joining the industry have been using artificial intelligence and AI, generative AI, agentic AI, kind of across the board in their day-to-day lives. And that's going to, I think, mitigate some of the literacy issues you have, because they're just going to come in with that knowledge. And then when you give them a responsibility to mitigate bias or look for bias or do all these things that we're talking about, they're going to be much more literate about that. And in a way, I'm not going to say the problem is going to solve itself, but a lot of the issues, Theresa, looks like you want to say something, but it's going to be easier, I think, to make them as AI literate as possible. Theresa, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, we can go down the rabbit hole now about, talent acquisition in the insurance industry, which is a whole, other level. And
let's not do that.
That's
another entire show.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right in that, the younger generation coming into the insurance industry, and, you're spot on. I think I saw the statistic that the median average age is something around 45 in the insurance industry. And, that obviously has an impact. But also people who are, probably in their 30s, because technology just moves so fast. And, I think we are all in a world where we can't believe there has been a time before things like ChatGPT, and it's not, that old. I think it's just about, what I mentioned earlier, this like lifelong learning, which is, just a part, like we don't live in a world where, you learn a job when you're in your, early 20s, and then you stay in this career for your entire life. With the same skill set. That's just not the world we live in anymore.
No. Okay. Let's talk about some regulatory issues, right? As soon as there's a new technology, and this was probably true as far back as electricity, right? When electricity was born, people were just like, okay, what do we do with this? How do we regulate it? And I don't think it's going to be any different in this space. Theresa, maybe you want to talk about some of the stuff that you've written about in the white paper about like just the regulatory environment and some of the stuff around that.
Yeah, that's, it's another rabbit hole, regulation and AI. We have, some information on, attempts to regulate AI. I think you can write an entire white paper just about regulation. And again, things are moving so fast, and regulators are also catching up. On top of that, here in the US, I think everybody is aware that there are quite some changes. Just this week was the announcement of the current government on like a new AI wish list that should be submitted from companies. No matter in which country you are, I believe regulation has not really caught up to the rapid development of AI.
It's just so hard. It's just so hard to keep up. Yeah.
And, maybe the EU is more on the forefront with the EU AI Act. But at the same time, this was also developed a few years ago. And again, might not reflect the current world, especially with, agentic AI, which is, the latest buzzword and, application of AI. I'm a huge fan of those, intergovernmental organizations like the OECD, United Nations. They have put out some AI principles. For example, the UNESCO has the recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And I think, these frameworks are good guiding posts for organizations while, regulation is still catching up. And we could have a situation where something is not regulated at the moment. Companies pay a lot of money to, implement a certain AI technology, and then regulation could catch up, and, this could run into issues. So from my perspective, it is advisable to pay attention to these like overarching global frameworks. And a lot of countries actually build then their AI governance and their AI laws around the principles that have been published by these organizations. We also see the different summits. We just had the one in France, which maybe was not as successful as many had hoped, or the outcomes. But that just shows how difficult this topic is and how new this topic is and how everybody is just trying to wrap their head around it. We have a bunch of frameworks listed. There's also the IEEE that has defined a structured approach to incorporate ethical considerations in AI. So there's lots of information out there. My recommendation would always be to go to these, global attempts to guide ethical development and what are the principles. And I think organizations, do well if they look at these guidelines and follow them in their AI implementation, even if local, AI regulation and law is not up to date yet.
Ichun, what do you think?
I actually want to give the regulators and the industry a little credit. I think they have learned from the internet era where they fell short, and they realize that, hey, they've got to be more proactive about it. And so in a way, we really actually need to rely on regulators and policymakers. They play a critical role in pushing back the business impulses to prioritize profits and efficiencies, right? So they play a critical role. They are in the position to establish industry-wide standards on fairness, transparency, accountability. And of course, they are principle-based, they are regulations-based. And so, but I think it's healthy to actually have both. And of course, it gives the organizations a little bit leeway to really adopt their standards. And industries, organizations do need the type of flexibility depending on the where they serve and depending on their environment. So I think the ambiguity and the dynamics you see out there, in my mind, is actually healthy. But of course, then it becomes a challenge how to stay on top. At the highest level, I think we are repeating ourselves, but the principles, the core principles of fairness, transparency, accountability, and explainability, if you continue to ask yourself how it should be applied in the context that we work with, and I think that will be helpful. And we also see actually very proactive regulators actually encouraging the dialogues between public and private sectors, as well as with research institutions and universities. So there's a lot of dialogues going on. So even though we don't see a clear announcement of this is the way to go, but a lot is happening, and it becomes a challenge, but it also is an opportunity for the companies to actually stand out, being very forward-looking, and then actually invest in building the credibility and the trust. And the trust built by organizations will actually, I believe, become the real competitive advantage in the world where consumers actually become much more aware.
Got it. I'm generally an optimist, right? So I think over the long arc of history, I just think it's all going to be okay. I think in the short term, though, I just cannot forget about the regulators that I've interacted with in the financial services industry and just how they miss the collateralized debt obligations, synthetic CDOs, like credit default swaps, and all this stuff that led to the 2007 financial crisis. They just kind of sat
That's
on the
why we need
sidelines and watched it.
regulators.
I get
That's
it.
why we
I
need
get it.
regulators.
Believe me, I know, because I lost my job because of all that stuff and I wasn't involved in it at all. And I'm hopeful that the stuff that we learned from things like that, and also way back in 1997 financial crisis, that what happens in the AI space, because it's a much more overriding technology and overarching technology that people will be paying closer attention, right? Somebody can just sit on a trading desk somewhere in New York or London and create a synthetic CDO, but the entire world is focused on artificial intelligence. So I think you're right that the way the regulators are looking at this is going to be different. Look, we've covered a lot of ground. And I just kind of want to wrap things up here with like the future of AI in insurance, and maybe just go to our last point. And I'll ask you this, Ichun, how do you see AI bias evolving? I'll say in like the next 4 to 7 years. And what kind of steps do you think insurers should take now to stay ahead of these potential risks? And then maybe we can get Theresa's opinion and then we can finish up.
Sure. I don't have the crystal ball.
I was counting on you for that. Can I send you one?
Please, happy to have it. We loved it, especially as I build up the business, right? But in my mind, it's very clear to me, though, that AI is going to be even more powerful than today.
Yeah,
and
way
it's
more.
going to be so much closely embedded into our daily lives, right? That means then the consequences of not addressing AI, not addressing AI-driven biases today, is going to be quite a problem. I think, Mike, you started to allude to that. But being an optimist like you, like Michael, like you, I do think that regulators and investors and all of us, the consumers, are started to and will pay close attention, right? And that's going to be the dynamic. That's going to be the pushback to the bad greed or priority first dynamics that has caused a lot of harms we have seen today, right? So a combination of increasing awareness and higher expectations from the society, as well as regulators, and let's support them. There's only so much they can do, given the resources and given the leeway they are given. But industries and organizations can help regulators do their job by working closely with them, and also help them do the right things. So what can insurers do to stay ahead? Is, again, hold on to fairness, transparency, and accountability as principles, and be serious about it. Educating everybody in the organizations and clearly define the roles and responsibilities of everybody in terms of bias mitigation. And at the end of the day, it's really everybody involved in the AI space, understanding bias, and decide to do the right thing within their power. That's going to make the difference in the long term.
Got it. Theresa, do you want to add anything before we go?
Yeah, just in terms of the future, of course, nobody has a crystal ball and understands what's happening. And again, AI is advancing so rapidly. I know many in Silicon Valley believe that within the next 2 years, we're going to have AGI, artificial general intelligence. So, at a level of what a human can do. If this really happens or not, we don't know. I think it's just important that we as humans understand our role in a world that is driven by AI, and how we can use this technology to, create even better world, a world where, future generations have their place, and where we take the opportunity that, this technology is giving us to identify these biases who have existed for many, many years, and now have the tools to address them and to remove them. I just think it is really important that, first of all, companies change their culture to, on the one hand, embrace it. What Ichun has mentioned, AI literacy, that is a priority, and that companies and, actually all of us become more agile and, take change as a constant. And not lose our critical thinking skills, because I think that is a huge risk we are all running into nowadays, where AI takes so many tasks that we stop applying these critical thinking skills and just trust that it will do the right thing. And I think there's a brave new world out there, but it needs us to be on top and not have, AI design our life, but us designing AI and therefore the world we live in.
Ichun, it sounds like you want to say something. Go ahead.
I just want to share the most powerful word I have come up myself that I rely on. That is trust. Right? Trust being also a business advantage to really invest in and build trust. And to build trust will then motivate us to pay attention to transparency, to fairness, to explainability, etc., to build the trust. And I do think trust is the powerful word that we can hold on to in the age of AI.
Awesome. Ichun Lai, a principal at Propel Global Advisory, and Theresa Blissing, the best-selling author of The Future of Insurance, Asia Rising, and the founder of InsurTech Amplified. You were both awesome. Thank you so much for doing this today.